Hi everyone, and welcome to lesson 5. This is the rescheduled one, thanks to Storm Eowyn. So we're going to look at how you can edit your photographs today on your smartphone. So I'll make a wee start and screen share, and hopefully it'll work here. There we go. And I'm just going to move this over to this side. Let's see in here. Perfect. Now, so welcome, and for anyone that's your first time popping on to the lessons, my name is Catriona and I am a professional photographer based in Dungannon, or just outside Dungannon, County Tyrone. And my photography business is called Divine Photography. And you can find me on socials here. This is Instagram and that is my Facebook page. As you know, the lesson's been recorded, so if you want to take time when it's been uploaded to the YouTube channel, you can pause the video at any point and go off and maybe make reference to any of the social media channels or links. And also you can pause today's video, which you probably will want to do more so than other ones, because we're going to have a lot of content on it about how to edit your photographs. So don't be afraid to stop it, have a practice on your phone, and then start to rewatch again. So that's my photography business, and then the photography training arm of my business is called the Photo Academy NI, and you can find me on Facebook and Instagram under Photo Academy NI. And as always, I start off by mentioning I have a free 52-week photography challenge, which is open to everyone, whether you use a camera or a smartphone. So this is the link to sign up. It's a great way of getting in regular practice, and that's one of the main things I tell anyone who comes to study with me is you don't need the best equipment. And what you do need to know is how to use the equipment that you have and then put in lots of practice. So feel free to sign up. You get one email every Monday with a topic, and then there's lots of tips in there helping you improve your overall photography. So let's get stuck in then. This week we're looking at editing your photos on your smartphone. So you start off, you've taken your photograph, and now what do you do with it? So the first thing I will mention is it's really important to try and get it right at the time when you're taking the photo, because no amount of editing is going to improve a photograph which is very overexposed or very underexposed, which means it's way too bright or way too dark. So it's important to try and use the tips that we have covered so far to try and get it as best in terms of light when you're taking the photograph. You can tweak it afterwards regarding your color adjustments or the shape of the photograph, etc. But try and get it right at the time. Every photograph that you'll see online now will have had some form of editing done. And with any art form, how you edit yours is your own personal choice. So and your own personal preference. Some people like very rich colors in their photos. Some people like more muted tones. Some people prefer black and white. So that part is totally down to you. There is no right or wrong. It's just a personal choice, same as with any art. So you can tweak that over time and see which works best for you. So in today's course, we're going to look at, first of all, how to just do very basic edits within the Photos app or the Gallery app on your phone. And then we're going to pop into Snapseed, which is Snapseed. And that's a free app that you can download on your phone. We've talked about it in some of the other lessons as well. So it's a great wee app, and some of the adjustments that you can make within the Photo or Gallery app, you can also do within Snapseed. So let's get stuck in then. So your general editing basics then on all phones. And this will vary depending on the make of phone that you have. So on iPhones, then you go into your Photos app and you can simply click from the camera app itself, the wee thumbnail in the bottom left to take in that way, or it will be a separate app on your phone called Photos. And depending on the iOS system, which is the operating system that you have, whatever version that you have. So pre-iOS 18, your screen would have looked something like this when you go into the Photos app and you click on any photo, and you would have pressed Edit in the top corner. If you have upgraded to the newer version, then your screen will look something like this. And the sliders option at the bottom here is where you go in to make the exact same adjustments. It's just you find it in a different way. So when you, when you click on either the sliders or edit button, it will then bring you a menu here. Your photograph will be in the center, and then there are a number of adjustments, which we're going to look at, but most of those are in a wee second. And you can tap on any of those and then use the slider underneath to move it left or right to make the adjustment to that particular setting. Samsung phones, then you tend to have like a pencil icon, and then when you tap on it, it will bring you through to a menu where you can make adjustments to the crop, which is changing the shape of the photograph, apply some filters. Then this is the option here where you can go in and make the same sort of adjustments that I just made reference to on iPhones, which is to adjust the lighting and the colors in your photo. You can also add text and stickers using this icon here. On Google Pixel, there's a slightly different. I think on some of them, there is the edit option with the wee sliders. On some, you may have two different sliders in the bottom right or left hand corner of the screen where you can go in and do the exact same thing. It's just you locate it differently. And then I have to say now, Google Pixel, their phones tend to be very much going towards AI adjustments where you're using AI technology. So they have an awful lot of adjustments in there. And I think Samsung as well have very much started to integrate that. So it's not just pure editing you're doing, you're also doing a lot of adjustments. Like you could remove somebody from a photograph or add someone in or swap faces, etc. So I'm not going to have time to go into all of that, but on Google Pixel, they have embraced a lot of the AI technologies. On Oppo phones, then you have your edit as well. You can go in, apply a number of different adjustments, and they also have quite a lot of like skin adjustment or retouching for portraits in there. So what are the types of adjustments? So when you're rewatching this, you might want to pause this and either take a screenshot of it, or you can write them down, whatever you fancy doing. But the adjustments that you can make are either light adjustments or color adjustments. So the light adjustments, exposure simply means making your image brighter or darker. Brilliance on this would be specific to iPhones, I think, and it lightens the shadows and tones down the highlights. So the highlights are the brightest part of your image. The shadows are the darkest parts of your photo. As I've just mentioned there, so highlights adjust the brightest parts, the shadows adjust the brightest part of the darkest part of the image, if that makes sense. A contrast then makes the darker parts darker, the brighter parts brighter, so it adds more punch to your images. Brightness then makes the overall image lighter or darker, and black point, again, I think that's specific to iPhones, adjusts the very darkest, the blackest black in your image. Your color adjustments then, you have saturation, and that will be common across all of the phones, and that's where you change the intensity of the colors in your image. Now, I'll just maybe mention it at this point. When you're editing, just be mindful of, now I know I said a bit earlier about your preferences in terms of how rich the colors are or not, but what you don't really want to do is make images look like they are artificial, in my opinion. You don't want it too heavily adjusted. So when you are adjusting, the scale tends to be like to plus 100 or minus 100. Plus 100 means that you're really applying that effect to the maximum, and minus 100 to the opposite. So I rarely be ever above around 30 either way, unless I'm changing it to black and white, which we'll talk about later on. But apart from that, in terms of color, be very mindful of the saturation option, because if you start to overdo it, then it looks processed, it looks artificial. So just be mindful of the saturation slider when you're using it. Vibrance then, it changes the intensity of the least saturated colors. So this is the one that I tend to use if I am editing within the Photos app or in a separate app. Vibrance is a more subtle adjustment to the colors. So I like it as opposed to the saturation, but I will use saturation subtly. Warmth then adjusts the yellow and the blue tones in an image, which makes it warmer or cooler toned. And then tint is one which adjusts the green or the magenta tones in your image. It's not something you're going to use very often, but say, for example, you take a photograph in a field where there's like bluebells, and what can happen is it can make the overall image look very green, and maybe skin tones look a wee bit green. So you can adjust that slider to try and add some magenta back in just to even it out. Then you have detail adjustments, and this is where you can adjust the sharpness, the definition, the noise, and the vignette. So the sharpness makes your image slightly more in focus, but it can make it look not as good a quality. So if you take a photograph and it's completely out of focus, sharpness is not going to make it in focus. It just makes it, say you've taken a photo and you just want to sharpen it a wee bit, it just brings the photo slightly more into focus. But be mindful again of sharpness, don't go too high. Otherwise, the quality of the image can drop. Definition then adds as it says, definition around the edges of the subject, and also adds contrast for more depth. I would tend to use that for say like textures, or anything with texture in the photograph, maybe a mountain range or concrete. If you have anything like that in the image, add a little bit of definition. Noise reduction is where you've taken a photograph, and one of the settings which we're going to talk about in the next video that I'm recording today, and that's where you've taken a photo, and ISO is one of the settings on your camera that it makes your image brighter or darker. However, if you set that setting too high, then what can happen is the quality of the image can drop. So if you have taken a photograph in somewhere that's very low light, then you can go into this option and use the noise reduction to reduce the obvious wee pixels in your image, but it can make it a wee bit softer. So if you are using that, then add a bit of sharpness again at the end of it to try and even it out. And vignette, then very simply, it darkens the corners of the edges of your image. So let's move into Snapseed then. Snapseed, as I mentioned, is a free app. It's the one that I use for all of my editing if I take photographs using my smartphone. And it's a great way of making adjustments to either all of the image, which is what you can do in your Photos app, but in Snapseed, you can go in and make selective adjustments to part of the image as well. So if you haven't used Snapseed before, that's the logo. If you're looking for the app, if you search for Snapseed, you'll find it in the App Store, or the Play, is that what it's called, on Google Play, on Android phones. And then you open the screen, it'll come to this screen here. Do what it says on the screen. Tap the big X in the middle of the screen, and then it brings you this menu where you will have the option to open from device, which means it opens the gallery or the Photos app. You can also take a photograph within Snapseed, but I don't recommend doing that. I would say take it using the proper the camera app on your phone. And then you can also simply open the last image. So say you've taken a photograph and you think, right, I just want to open that very quickly and edit it. It'll open the last image that you took on your phone. So you can tap, I normally tap on open from device and then pick the image that I want to adjust. Then you're taken to the screen where you have your image in the middle of the screen. And then along the bottom, you have these thumbnails. And then you have at the bottom, you will have, now depending on whether you're iPhone or Android phone, it will either say looks or styles at the bottom left. Then it'll say tools, and then it says export. So export is where you're saving the image and your to your phone, basically. So the first option of looks and styles, they're like presets, like a filter. So you can very quickly just tap on any of the thumbnails, and then that makes a series of adjustments to your photograph. And then when you're finished, you just press the tick icon that appears after you have made the adjustment, and that can be you finished in terms of editing. You can also press the X button to cancel out of that adjustment that you've just made. And then you could go into tools instead, which goes into a further range of options and menu. So you've opened your photograph. If you press tools, then it brings you up this menu on the screen, and you can scroll up or down on the screen to show you all of there are 28 different editing tools and filters that you can use. As I say in here, I'm not going to go through them all, but we'll cover the most useful ones that I would tend to use more often. So at the top of the screen, I just want to mention this. You will see these options, and you have 3 dots here. And if you tap on that, it brings you up a menu here where you can go in and watch some tutorials in the Snapseed app itself, which are great. Now, there are quite a variety of different options in there, and they show you how to do different things within Snapseed. So if you're wanting to explore it more, don't be afraid to use that option. So when you go into any photograph then, or any of the tools, you can see an option at the top of the screen here where it will say 0. So it'll tell you the adjustment that you're making, and then it'll say 0 beside it, which means you haven't adjusted it yet. And to make any adjustment in Snapseed, all you need to do is swipe your finger to the right on the screen to apply more of that adjustment, or to the left on the screen to apply less. And then it will show you up here a plus or a minus. So if you see it's a plus number, that means you have applied more of that adjustment, and if it's a minus, if you've applied less or removed some of that particular filter or color. And just remember, you'll always see at the bottom, you'll have your plus icon, your tick icon, which is where when you're finished making the adjustment, press that and it'll take you back to the home screen. The X option takes you back out of that tool that you're working on, and then it just cancels anything that you've been working on in that particular tool. Most of the options have these slider options here, which bring you up a further menu where you can go in and adjust or pick one of those and make adjustments. And then some of them have this like magic wand tool, and that is where it allows you to let the app make whatever adjustments it thinks you should make. Now, to be fair, I never really use that at all, so I tend to make my own adjustments. Then I'm going to cover this bit now in case we don't get to it at the end, but hopefully we will. So say you've taken your photograph, or say you've opened your photograph, you've made your adjustments, and what do you want to do next? Then you want to export it or save the photo. Now, depending on whether you are an iPhone user or Android, the next screen that you see when you press the export option will vary slightly. Most of them tend to have the share option, which allows you to share your images to other people via different apps. You will have open in, which allows you to open the image in a different app. And the next bit is what varies between iPhones and Android. So you have save on Android phones, and that means it saves a copy of your image to the photo gallery. Save on iPhones saves over the original photograph, but you can undo these again, and your phone will ask you permission whether you want to modify the photo. So I don't, on iPhones, I tend to not use the save option. What I would use instead is save a copy, and this saves a copy of your photograph with the changes that you've made. So you still have your original, but it saves a copy. Export on iPhones creates a copy of your image with permanent changes, and these cannot be undone. And export on Android creates a copy of your photograph, and then but the quality can be changed in the settings menu. So that's the slight difference between those two. And then export as on some Androids, and it creates a copy to a selected folder on your phone. So that's the difference between the different options on iPhone and Android. So I'll just show you this in case this happens. So say you're in a photograph, you're working on it, and you think, do you know what, I don't really like these adjustments and I want to start again, or I want to just work on a different image. So if you go and press, say you're at the home screen here, if you press open in the top left-hand corner, this prompt comes up and it'll say, all unsaved images applied to the current image will be lost if the new image is open. So if you want to go ahead and work on a new image, press open. If you've done this by mistake, then press cancel. And that's really the difference between the two. So you can go ahead and open a new image and work on it, but know that any adjustments you've made to that image will not be saved. So you need to export it first. So the different tools then, I think I've covered that already. So you have, yes, the 0 at the top, and then you swipe to the right to increase that, to the left to reduce it. The main one that I would tend to use first is called Tune Image. So it's in the main menu, it's here in the top left-hand corner. So Tune Image, much like the adjustments that you can make within the gallery or the Photos app on your phone, allows you to adjust your brightness, contrast, saturation, ambience, highlights, shadows, and warmth. So you go into Tune Image, you press the slider icon, and then it brings up a further menu here. You can tap on any of these. So say you wanted to adjust the contrast, you tap on contrast just on the screen, and then it will show contrast at the top here. And then you move your finger to the right to increase the contrast, or to the left to reduce the contrast. Say you've done one, you can then tap on the slider option again and adjust the highlights. Do that. You can then go and adjust the brightness. So you can do all of these within the Tune Image tool. And then when you're finished, press the tick icon, and that's you done within that tool. And you can make further adjustments or save your image. You can have a look over those at your leisure. So basically, the only one that's different in Snapseed is ambience, and it adds a glow to the edges of your subject. And it is a nice option for photos where the light is coming from behind the subject towards the camera. So I think that's really the only difference between it and the other photo app. Talked about that already. I think we've talked about that already. So that's your tick icon to say you want to go ahead. X brings you back out of that tool, and that's your auto adjust. And then these are just some differences that it can make. So you can see the brightness, it makes it brighter or darker. Contrast, sorry, is that one. You can see it makes it more richer. Saturation, it increases the colors. Ambience doesn't do particularly a lot in that particular photo. So just to let you see the difference. And then the highlights, where it affects the brightest parts of the image, and the shadows is the darkest parts. And then the warmth, you can see how it makes it warmer or cooler toned. So that's your Tune Image. Crop tool then. The crop tool is where you want to change the shape of the photo. And again, it'll just show us one of the tool options. You go into your image is open, you press crop, and it defaults to the screen. So you can change the actual shape of your image. You can keep it to the original layout of the image, but then what you do is you just draw on the screen with your fingers and you move these arrows in or out or up or down on the screen. So you can pick from a number of presets, shapes like a square or 3:2 ratio, etc. Or if you want to press free, free means that you can change the shape completely, where you just drag the corners of the image into whatever shape that you want. And then when you're finished again, press the tick icon. This option here, did you see the wee arrow? You can change the direction of the crop from vertical to horizontal. So say you took a shot initially and it was horizontal, but you wanted to change it to vertical format, go to crop, press the arrow, and then you can change the shape of it to a vertical format. Vignette then is where you darken the edges or brighten the edges. It's totally up to you. But again, just be mindful of this, that you don't overdo it. It's okay to subtly darken the edges, but don't have it that they're overly bright or overly dark. So when you go into Vignette, you'll see the slider option here, which brings you up this menu. There's a blue dot on the middle of the screen. So you place the blue dot with your finger, move it around to where you want to have the part that isn't darkened, basically. And then it sort of is almost like a circular shape out from that where you draw on the screen left or right then to make it brighter or darker. So you can adjust the outer brightness is at the edges, the inner brightness is in the center of the image. So you can make it more or less bright. And you can see how it has subtly darkened the edges. So the reason that you're using a vignette is, if you've watched the previous videos, we talked about where does the eye go to in an image? It normally goes to the brightest part of the photo. So by darkening the edges, you're drawing the attention into the center. So in this shot, the wee teddy bear here is the focal point, and you want to make it brighter than the rest of the image. Rotate then is where you want to, say you've taken a shot and the horizon line, which is where the sky meets the ground, is slightly skew-iffy. So if you want to adjust that and make sure that your horizon lines are level, go to rotate. And what it normally does is I don't know what technology they use, but if it can detect if it's a landscape or a building, and sometimes it'll auto-correct it for you. It doesn't always get it right, but all you need to do is you literally move your finger underneath the image on the screen to straighten your horizon line, basically. So I use that a lot for any shots that I feel are slightly just not completely parallel. And then if you tap on this icon here, which is the wee triangles, this flips it horizontally. And then you just can rotate your image by 90-degree angles in a clockwise direction by tapping on this icon here. HDR scape, I think we may have touched on this in one of the previous, but I'll very quickly mention it here. So HDR stands for high dynamic range. It's useful for landscape shots, but be mindful of the fact it can look, I'm just keeping me in the time here, that you don't want it to look artificial. So the end result, as I mentioned, is very distinctive, but it's not to everyone's taste. So if you go in, you can tell the app a wee bit more information about what's in the photo. If it's nature or people, or if you want a strong and obvious application of the HDR tool, then you would tap this option. If you want a more fine result, tap this option. So that's the original image, and this is what it can look like with HDR. So I always tell people, if you have a lot of blue sky in the photo, be careful of HDR, because you can see here it has done lots of funky things to the sky where there are lines, there are bands showing up. So I know some of my students sometimes would tell me, oh, I tried that, but it looks weird. So if you see, it'll work for certain things, but for blue skies, I tend to find that you get a lot of this banding here. So just be careful of using HDR at times. And what you can do though is, once you've, when you've made the adjustment, say you've picked fine, and you think, right, it's okay, but it's got some of this going on, you can then fine tune it by pressing the slider option. It brings you up this choice here. So you have the filter strength. So say you felt it was too much, you could then reduce the filter strength down, so that's not as obvious. Brightness makes it brighter or darker, and then saturation is the color. So that's where you can go in and fine tune your HDR scape tool. Drama then, kind of similar in terms of be mindful of it, that it can be quite obvious. So drama, as the name suggests, is quite a dramatic change in the colors in your image and also the contrast in it. So when you go into drama, it has a number of presets along the bottom here. So you could pick a very dark and moody tone, or a brighter one, or just someone in between. And then, like the last one, you can go to your slider option and fine tune the results to make it not just as dramatic. I find, but I do like this particular tool, but again, just be careful if there's a lot of sky that's just plain blue sky, or say something that's very plain in it, like I'm trying to think of an example, a plain wall. It could make some weird shapes and lines in it. So it's nice to use, but I normally, if I do pick one of these, I might pick one of these ones that aren't as dark. This particular shot here, I think was a dark too, which is the most obvious one. But then you can go to your sliders and make an adjustment to make it not as obvious in terms of the filter strength and the saturation. Perspective is a useful tool if you are taking photographs where you have this example here. Say, for example, you have a building. And when you take a photo, particularly if you are using the wide angle lens, which is the 0.5 option on your smartphone, what happens is it does take in a lot of the scene. But if you were to stand in this example at the bottom of a building, when you look up, the vertical lines tend to go off into a point. So that is known as converging verticals. So it goes off to a point as opposed to going straight up. So there are specific cameras that you can use to try and overcome that converging verticals. They're called, it's lenses as opposed to the camera. And they're called tilt shift lenses, where they try and avoid that happening. But there is a tool in Snapseed, which is known as perspective, where you can go in and adjust that. It basically tries to straighten them so that it goes up in a straight line as opposed to going off to a point. However, know that if you're doing that, it's going to crop the image somewhat. It's hard to explain without you seeing it. So, but it is a good way if I have taken a photo where you want to adjust the verticals, you can try it that way. So it can adjust the verticals going up, but also the horizontals. So say you've taken a photograph at an angle to a building, again, it will go off to a point. If you want to try and straighten that out, that it's not converging, you can use your perspective tool for that way. So when you go into perspective, it has a number of options here, and it'll have these arrows on the screen. So if you want to adjust the vertical perspective, you simply move your finger up or down on the screen to straighten the lines out, or horizontally, again, just move it left or right on the screen to adjust the horizontal perspective. So yeah, you can have a play around with that and see if you find it useful. And what can happen though is if you are adjusting it, remember what I said, it'll potentially crop the image if you're really making a very obvious adjustment one way or other. So what happens then is you'll have a space here. So you can then select if you want the app to fill in that space with either a white or a black color, or if you want to use smart technology to fill it in, and it will sample from around this area and replace what's missing with what's nearby. Now, again, this worked okay in this image because that's quite a plain blue sky, worked fine. If there is texture or pattern, it would not work just as well. So, but try it and see how you get on. If you wanted to add text to your photos, say you were trying to, I don't know, make a wee photo book or something, and you wanted to add text on top of the image, you can do that within Snapseed as well. And it's also handy for social media. Say you're sharing something on there, you could do that. So you open the text tool and then you choose the style of the font that you want. And then you can choose the different colors as well. There's a color palette icon here, and that's where you change the colors. And then if you want to change the opacity, which is the intensity of whether or not you can see through the writing or not, you can do that using the middle icon here. So there are a number of different options then of font under this what would you call styles icon. So then simply what you do is you go in and you tap on the screen, and then you type in whatever the word is or words that you want to do. And then you can pinch on the screen to change the size of the text and also to rotate it if you wanted to change it from vertical to horizontal. You just pinch on the screen with your fingers in or out to make it bigger or smaller or to rotate it. That's the opacity slider, which I talked about here, where you can do that. And then you can also invert the text to change it as well using this icon. And then it will show the text as an overlay with only the image showing through the text. So I'll show you an example here. If you wanted to try and do this, what you would do is you open your image in Snapseed, go to your text tool, add the text, and choose the color, and then place it where you desire it to be in the photo. Then press the tick icon. Then you go to stacks option at the top of the screen, which is, I'm trying to see if I can see it here. Oops. It's hard to say this, sorry, I go back. It's basically like, sorry, I thought I had that in here. It's like at the very top of the screen. So you went into tools, you press the tick icon, it'll take you back to the home screen. And at the top of the home screen, there are like, it's like a diamond shape with a wee diamond behind it. So if you press, that's known as a stacks icon. So tap on that, press view edits, and then on the tool below the tool below the text tool in that stack that comes up, press the back arrow, which is the top of the screen. Then go to tools, tune image, and in the slider option, choose saturation and slide your finger on the screen to the left until you convert your image to black and white. Press the tick icon, and then you go back to stacks and press view edits, and then tap on the text layer shown at the top of the stack. And then your colored text will reappear on top of your black and white image now. Sorry, it's very hard to explain this without showing it to you in person. And then you press your back arrow and export your image, and it should end up with something like this. There are lots of wee tips like this within the Snapseed app itself, within the tutorials, which I showed you at the start. So we can try and experiment in there. Curves then is another option which I use a lot. So we touched on the HDR option. If you find that it's giving you very artificial looking results, I tend to then pop into curves instead. So curves is a tool that allows you to make adjustments to your photograph from brightness to contrast and to adjust the highlights and the shadows. And it's a very versatile tool in photography in general. It's one of the first things I was showing in terms of editing for my images, as opposed to not just my smartphone photos. And you can use it in any desktop editing program such as Photoshop or Lightroom. So when you open the curves tool, you'll see an overlay appears over your photograph here. So it's a square with a diagonal line from top right to bottom left. This is often referred to as the contrast curve. And then you can adjust the brightness and the contrast in your photograph using this. It's not a curve at the minute, but you'll see it turned into a curve. So again, there are preset curve options, which you can tap along the bottom of the screen. You can scroll along and pick whichever one you want. If you want a very obvious contrast, then you would pick hard contrast. Soft contrast is more subtle. So the actual line itself, then you can move this line up or down, left or right. So you're moving it this way or this way. It's more like a diagonal movement on the screen. So up here in the top, sorry, I'm starting at the bottom. Sorry, the bottom left-hand point here it represents black. The black is black in your photo. The top right then represents the white point, which is the brightest white in your image. And then the bottom part of the line here, say from here to here, represents the shadows. Here to here represents the midtones, which is the midtone area. And then from here to here represents the highlights, which is the brightest part of your image. So you can literally tap on this line at any point. So say if I wanted to adjust here, I would tap on the screen and one of these wee nodes appears. And then you literally just move it up or down, left or right, to see the difference that it makes to your image. So if I wanted to darken down the highlights, which is the brightest part, I would tap on the line and move it down sort of in a southeasterly direction, if that makes sense. And then similarly, if I wanted to lift the shadows, then I would tap on the line here and move it a northwest direction up and to the left. Yeah, so it'll normally, when you open the tool, it normally defaults to a range of these presets, as I mentioned, but you can fine tune it yourself. And then if you tap on this icon here, the wee eye icon, it shows you the adjustments that you're making. And then you can further go in, and if you really want to fine tune it, you can go in and adjust So every image, so white light is made up of red, green, and blue light, and they all come together. So you can go in and fine tune any of those individually within the curve tool if you wanted to adjust the reds in your image, the greens or the blues. And then the luminance option adjusts the brightness of all the colors at the same time. So you can lighten or darken hues of the colors by moving the line left or right, up and down. That's what I mentioned earlier when I was starting out. Someone told me, and it's commonly known as the S curve, and the S curve is where you move this part northwest and this part southeast to create a subtle S shape. And this is a way of adding contrast to your images. Now, I know it's not to everyone's taste. Some people prefer images that are more matte and not as rich in colors. So you might want to invert that, or you might want to drag these wee sliders here either up or down along the axis points to adjust your image. It's something for you to go in and play around with, but the S curve, if you do this particular shape here, will give you a nice contrast. The more obvious you make the S shape, the more contrast you'll have. I tend to do it quite subtly. So let's see, sorry, I have to move this webcam again. What did I say? Oh yeah, so that shows you the adjustment that using the S curve can make to your image. And then if you want to make it a more matte image, then you simply move the diagonal line for the shape. So you've moved this up, this down. It gives you a more matte finish. And you can see the difference between the two. So it's a personal choice. You can decide which one that you prefer. There we go. Thank you so much. I hope you enjoyed that. That's just a taster of all the things that you can do within Snapseed. And there are so many adjustments in there. It's very hard to try and fit it all in to a short video. But I hope you enjoyed that. And let's see if I can stop screen sharing here. Please again remember to tag us, the Libraries NI or the Photo Academy NI, if you tag us in any photographs that you've taken, that you've edited and shared online, and then that way we can see how you're getting on. The video has obviously been recorded and will be uploaded to the YouTube channel hopefully within the next few days. And yeah, so I hope you enjoy that. Remember, practice is key, and subtlety, and then find your own style. That's the advice I would give you for your editing.